Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and we are back with a Saturday live stream. Not talking about new releases today. We are going to actually talk about the state of the watch market because there have been a number of articles or announcements that have related to that coming out over just this last week that I thought would be a good opportunity to go ahead and focus on. So we might touch on the NFL Breitling watches probably on a different episode if I even remembered to do it. But anyway. Before we get started, in terms of catch-up sort of stuff or housekeeping, as I like to call it, not a lot for you today. I didn't have any pre-recorded videos this last week. I did put out a call to my 99-cent club members, which there is a link in the somewhere down there where you can join that if you are interested, for another opportunity to do some watch roasts. And I did get a submission. I haven't read through all of it yet, but I'll probably have that out in the near future. But I will be working on it once I get around to actually going over the watches and coming up with how exactly I want to burn them. Separate from that, the review. Normally, I would have had the review of the Parmigiani PF Tonda micro rotor out by now. However, there was a blemish on the dial. It's under warranty to get that taken care of. So that's going to have to wait because I didn't film it yet. Not to mention that I don't like to do the reviews until I have about a week's worth of time on the watch. So I need like 1 or 2 more days before I'd be fully comfortable giving my opinion on it. But that should hopefully be coming out in, I don't know how long it will take, if it's just a dial swap and how long that'll be. I normally assume for servicing 2 months. So it'll probably be a while. On the wrist today is my G-Shock, square G-Shock. So I had it out for mowing yesterday, and I didn't feel like getting out something else. So that is what we're going to stick with. We will not be having to worry about Casio today. We will be worrying about some other companies. But before we jump into the first of this discussion about the watch market collapse, I had to have a good clickbait title. So yes, the impending collapse. Very, very important. Good morning, Kevin. Welcome to the live stream and the Escapement Show. Good morning or afternoon or evening, depending where everyone might be. An underachieving watch collector says hello and asks when the fire sales start. Maybe soon, maybe not. Hard to say, but I do think that you are already able to find quite a bit of good discounting on a lot of watches available secondhand. So if you've been watching Chrono 24, or sometimes Chrono 24 is a little weird. I love watching Chrono 24, but a lot of it is almost like retail price stuff that just sits there and doesn't move, and it's just sort of there, and it artificially inflates the pricing. So sometimes I think it's better for you to go to the major secondhand dealers like David S.W., Bob's Watches, 1916 Company, European Watch Company, Swiss Watch Expo. Those would be ones that I think I've bought through every single one of the Watchfinder. I've purchased through every single one of them. Sometimes they have high expensive stuff that, is more than it should be, but you might get a better sense of pricing when you look at them, because they don't always, a lot of that stuff, if it's not a hype piece, it's not going to start there where it usually is on Chrono 24. So just something to suggest. The only problem is Chrono 24, you can look up pretty much anything, and on those sites, it's whatever they've got available. Good morning, Joe Bolt. Welcome to the live stream. And so we're going to get started with a micro brand. So this is an area where, getting back to underachieving watch collectors' question about the fire sales, micro brands might be one to watch for regarding that. Now, normally we wouldn't think that because there aren't authorized dealers for micro brands, or at least as a general rule, there are not. And so you basically have 2 options. You either find someone who's trying to sell it used, and there usually aren't very many available. So if you're after a particular model, that can be a big struggle or a big wait. Or you have to go directly to the manufacturer, to the company itself, and make the purchase. But there was an announcement this week. Hopefully you can read it. This is I just clipped it and saved it as an image from Facebook because I didn't know if the post would stay up. So from September 3rd, Inth watches. And I don't know, I'm not super familiar with Inth. I had heard of them. I probably have seen 1 or 2 YouTube videos, but I never shopped them. Because my understanding is they're mostly known for making homage style watches. So I don't think they had the name recognition of what Pagani design or anything like that. But they had a lot of models that had some popularity because they looked like something that was higher end. So in case you can't read it, and it's short enough, I'll go ahead and read it really quickly. Chris with Inth Watches writes, with a heavy heart, I announce that Inth Watches will be ceasing production and closing our doors in the coming months. While this is an unavoidable decision due to global economic conditions, we are grateful for the support from our loyal customers and fans over the years. Starting today, we're offering discounted prices on remaining accessories and parts. And I won't read the rest of it aloud. So there you go. If you want a fire sale, Nth is having one. As is Hodinkee still. I don't know how much is left in the Hodinkee shop, but they marked some things down quite a bit. But anyway, I wanted to go ahead and start with this one, even though I do not have an opinion about Nth itself. I've never handled one of their watches. I've never considered one of their watches. I only vaguely know the name. However, this announcement is not surprising to me given the softness of the watch market. Now, Nth comes at it from a different perspective than I think some of what we are going to be jumping into here in a little bit. And that is because it's a micro brand, I think it's competing in a different space than where we're seeing a lot of other stuff. Where we're going to get into some of the bigger brands like the luxury brands later. They've been pretty public about the struggles that they are facing because China's soft on buying watches right now. I'm guessing, but I don't know this for a fact. I'm guessing that is not Nth's problem. Nth's problem is that they're in the micro brand, lower, more affordable micro brand side of the equation. And the competition is steep now. It is very steep. In the case of Nth in particular, reading some posts, I think both on Reddit and on Watch Crunch, a lot of people who know more about the company than me seem to feel that Nth's big problem is they came out, they had these homage style watches, and then AliExpress has undercut the pricing significantly. So you can basically get the same looking watch as an Nth watch for quite a bit less money by going on AliExpress. So because of that, Nth is in a very awkward position. It's not luxury, so it doesn't, like, high-end collectors have zero interest in the brand. And if you want a knockoff watch, there are cheaper ones that look the same. So they find themselves in an unenviable position, even if they were first to market, that they can no longer compete against the AliExpress price point. That's the supposition that a lot of people have been running with. I think that could very well be the case. I'm not positive on it. We've seen this, or I've seen it when it comes to straps. So that's been something that's happened quite a bit. There are strap manufacturers. People like them. They get excited about a particular strap, and then eventually very same looking straps end up coming out on AliExpress. In fact, a lot of times they're so similar looking that there is a belief that the actual manufacturer for some of the bigger strap names just ends up selling them unbranded on AliExpress for quite a bit less money. So in those sort of scenarios, you're stuck with this question of, and there's no quality sacrifice. You're giving up branding, and on third-party straps, who really cares about the branding? So, and maybe that's designs and like the company paid for all the molds and all the shaping and whatever they're getting made. So they underwrote it all, and then someone else is basically taking it and exploiting it and selling it for less. But for an end consumer, the savings is what tends to matter. And so it does not matter to the consumer that Deluxe got undercut, for example. So anyway, that's the situation with Nth as a case in point. So I think that one was very interesting when I wanted to start with it, because the micro brand space, I think a lot of people have felt that it might be immune to market forces. I just think it's different market forces going on, because the micro brands, a lot of them, not all of them, we do have higher dollar micro brands, but a lot of the micro brands are operating in a space where smartwatch pricing is competitive. And that's been the challenge for companies like Orient, Seiko, Casio, is their watches like this, like the G-Shock, are running into a situation where they have, do you get this, or do you get something that links up to your phone and like does stuff? And a lot of people say, I want to get the thing that does stuff, a lot of non-collectors. So micro brands, though, have almost always oriented around appealing to collectors, people who buy Baltic, people who buy the Zelos, people who, these are brands that collectors want. They're not appealing to the mass market. Nth was in the same vein, even if it was maybe less creative in terms of its own designs. It was for people that knew they wanted something, a particular classic watch look, but they wanted to pay Nth's prices, until Nth's prices weren't the best prices, because there's no brand loyalty to a little brand like that, I would say. So I think that's interesting. There are so many other more famous brands that do the same thing. Underachieving Watch Collector has a good point here, like San Martin ate Nth's lunch. It doesn't have to just be like AliExpress no-name stuff either. It can be things like San Martin and the other more famous homage style brands. that have more successfully done what Nth was trying to do. Nth wasn't around all that long. It's been a few years, but it's not like, I don't think they've even been around 10 years. So to me, this is very noteworthy because I don't think this is going to be the last micro brand that we see go away. In fact, I'm going to say it's not even going to be the last micro brand we see go away this year. I don't know how many can weather the last few months of 2024, but I don't think that the market is going to dramatically shift for micro brand demand. There are just too many of them. There are too many companies, in my opinion. There are too many micro brands operating right now. And it's going to be like a survival of the fittest. If they're all in at the same price point, it's going to be customer service, quality control, and design language that are going to be the things that win out, because dollar for dollar, there's everything's available. So we'll end up seeing what happens. But I think those that are in the homage space, like Nth, are the ones that are going to face the most risk. That's my take. Let's see. Oh, congratulations, Kevin's on doing another interview with Parker Street Ministries. So those that want to search that up, there it is, popped up, so the people watching the recording can easily see that. Good morning, Ken. And he says, do you mean we could talk about money today without annoying half the community? Don't tip me now. No, you can never fully do it, because I found this is true in any price point. Rolex will always be the standout because so many of their watches go for more use than they do new. Even today, might not be worth it for a flipper to buy a new one and sell it to a secondhand or a gray market dealer, because they're not going to pay a certain amount over. But the amount the consumer gets asked to pay is still higher for a lot of the sports watches. There will always be a segment of the community that does not like talking about watches as investments. I sympathize as a hobbyist. It gets annoying because you feel like investors have come in and they've driven up prices. And so if they weren't in, we would be able to get more watches for less. And so there's an instinct to be pissed about that. But I've seen it in other hobbies too. Pinball is another big hobby of mine that many of you know about. We saw the same thing during the pandemic. Pinball machines, you could buy a new one and you could sell it for $2,000 more immediately. You could play it and sell it for $2,000 more. It didn't have to be, box and stickers. You could put some plays on it, a few hundred, and you would still make money. And it really upset people because there were some that were doing it as an investment at that point. And, that's a perfectly legitimate reason to engage in anything. Is, wanting to make money is a reason to engage in something. It's a legitimate reason. But if you were in before that was popular and that comes in and it impacts your ability to get what you want, it's also understandable that you would be upset. So in this instance, but I mean, I've even seen people complain to me, like when I've talked about the reluctance of buying micro brands, because of the amount of loss I would take once I want to get rid of the watch versus a name brand. And that even sticks in some people's craw, and I guess it's craw. And they'll say, well, you shouldn't care about value retention. Like, well, if I had infinite money, absolutely, I wouldn't care about value retention. But I do care about value retention, because the more value I retain on a watch, if I choose to get rid of it, the more I can put into a new watch. So it's only logical. We'll see what people feel about with all of that. The Escapement Show says, I think that it was easy to launch a micro brand about 3 to 4 years ago. People were very keen on micro brands, but there are loads of them now. It's a hard market to stay afloat in. It's not just the volume, in my opinion, of the number of micro brands either. It's also the manufacturers in China that are supplying a lot of the cases and supplies. My understanding from hearing from others, like some interviews that's happened on Superlative Podcast, I think was the one. I've heard a few though. It's harder now, like it's just a higher dollar amount to get in. So a lot of micro brands got in when the prices were pretty low for getting that sort of stuff. But because of all of this demand, the suppliers that are actually putting everything together about these watches, they're asking for a lot more. So now you have to be a lot more profitable. But if your prices went up on all your suppliers, was Nth able to raise their prices? Are they Richemont? No, they are not. Can they go up 50% on their knockoff Reverso? I don't think they had a knockoff Reverso, but I'm rolling with a theme here. No, they wouldn't be able to. So people wouldn't tolerate it. So it's actually more interconnected even than just the volume of the brands, though. I think that's how we as consumers are going to most connect with it. He also adds, I know a friend who owns a French micro brand. He launched a couple of years ago on Kickstarter and reached well over his goal. He tried a new watch last year on Kickstarter and didn't reach his goal. Yeah. I mean, it could be just a fatigue. We don't have the same problem in watches that we do in pinball, which is you run out of space. In pinball, you run out of space, or you run out of money, or you run out of both. So that's often been an issue that a lot of people have talked about, because pinball is also soft. All sorts of hobbies are soft right now. There'll be people that will say, well, the reason it's so soft is people have filled up their game rooms with good games. So now it's harder to make the choice. What do I let go of to bring in something new? I've had a more generalized sense that that's not as true for watches, because you could live in a studio apartment and basically fit as many watches as you'd ever want. Like, there are ways, they just don't take up much space. But that said, I do think a lot of people approach this hobby with thinking about the total amount of dollars that are in the collection, and they don't want to go over a particular amount. So there's a pressure to get rid of stuff if you're going to bring in new stuff. But if you love your collection, like, it's gotten harder and harder for me because I've been better able to curate as I've gone along in the hobby. But that's part of the journey. So, I've been trying to sell and about 6 watches this year. I've sold half of them. Actually just sold the Seiko that I had. And so, but picking which watches to go, it's gotten harder over time. 2 years ago, it was very easy for me to know exactly which watches to get rid of, because I was still figuring out what I really liked. Joe, welcome to the live stream, by the way, and thank you for being a 99-cent club member. Says, I think the micro brands with a great founder and marketing will survive. Need a loyal following. Yes, and I think Zelos might be a good example that has still been able to maintain. There's that air of hype to it where it's hard to get the watches on release, but there's a judgment to that, because other people, we see this more with the mainline brands than the micro brands, but people get mad about that limited artificial scarcity game that companies like that play. Or Ming was well known for playing this game with these limited pushes on the watches and stuff, and people got really frustrated because it was really hard to get them and those sort of things. Underachieving says, I'm sure most micro brands are undercapitalized and during tough times run out of money. Yeah, it's a question of if they have a lot of surplus inventory. And I think a lot of them probably operate on tight enough margins that they don't do big bulk buys. We kind of talked about this, I think, was it last week or maybe the week before? It doesn't really matter. But there was, or maybe we didn't talk about it at all, but it's come up on some other things. Seagull, the movement manufacturer in China that makes the, one of the most, if not the most affordable mechanical chronograph, and it's very popular. It's in a lot of the stuff like the Studio Underdog chronographs and such, that they have decided as a movement supplier that the minimum order will now be 10,000 movements. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money up front, because obviously you can't, unless you're doing like a weird pre-order model thing, you can't sell the watches ahead of time. You need the movements to build the watches. So 10,000, how many micro brands would buy an order of 10,000 movements in one go? I don't know if any of them would. Maybe some could. Maybe some have the capitalization to be able to do that adjustment. I think what's more likely is some of them are going to have to just start looking at more expensive movements that they don't have to buy in as large of a bulk purchase supply. That's what I think will end up happening. So given that we're seeing that side, going out of business aspect of the market, let's stay low price right now, but let's go ahead and let's jump to another sign that I think of the watch market having issues. I'm sure this made a lot of you happy. Link in the video description to this article. We're not really going to read the article. We never do, but I'm not really here to show you a bunch of pictures on it or anything. But this announcement about Swatch finally, there's a reason I'm saying finally deciding to put four actually, of the MoonSwatches, those collaboration chronographs between Omega and Swatch, up for sale online. Now, there are some caveats. First, I noted it's only 4 watches. I'm going to look real quick to be able to tell you which ones. Missions to Earth, Moon, Mars, and the Sun. So the Moon one's the one that's the most traditional looking. The Mars one's for the most fun one. I'd say a lot of people were really excited about because of its unique aesthetic. It's this red one here. The Sun and the Earth, I didn't think were all that particularly popular. Note these that you see in the cover shot. This was a weird choice, in my opinion, for Fratello. These are not the 4. Obviously, there are 5 watches here, and it's not this one, or this one. Here's the Moon one, and here's the Mars one. But so anyway, again, it was just an announcement, so they just stuck a cover photo on. So, okay, I'm going to set that aside. You can read the article if you want, but I basically covered point 1 was that. That's only 4 of them. Point number 2 is it's only the United States and China. So my apologies to my European watchers and my Australian watchers of this channel, but so currently it's only the US and China. Why? I believe their official statement is it's because there aren't a lot of Swatch boutique, like the land area and the density of the population and such is there are a lot of locations with a lot of people in China and the US that do not live near a Swatch boutique where you would be able to go and buy these. I would be a case in point. So a lot of you may know I live in the Kansas City area. This metro area has over 1 million people. I live on the Kansas side, and my county has over 600,000 people alone, and more people live over on the Missouri side. However, we don't have a Swatch boutique in Kansas City. I think the closest one is Dallas. That's an 8-hour drive south. So that's part of their argument. However, what I think is more telling is getting right back to the discussion about Inth. This is because they are hurting on sales. That is what I think. I think Swatch has been looking at this and going, you know what? We are not selling enough of these anymore. The MoonSwatch has been their savior. It has been a shining gem in the Swatch group since it came out. But the demand was, of course, the highest during that when it dropped, right towards the tail end of that pandemic era, where people were queuing up outside. People were selling them for over $1,000 on eBay and all the rest of it. So they're slowly loosening their grip. It's just a few watches, it's not even the majority of the collection. And it's just 2 locations, albeit very large markets. The reason I said finally at the start of this segment is when the MoonSwatch was first revealed, Swatch told us they were going to be sold online. They just initially were not. And they drug and it wasn't supposed to be like in 2024. It was very clear it was supposed to be later that year. They walked that back almost immediately because the demand was so much higher than they didn't realize they had made a hype thing. That's how true hype works, is you don't know it's hype until it goes viral and it becomes hype. And that's what happened with their watch. And so then they were like, let's just keep selling it at the boutiques, which, while it was annoying for me because I wanted one, it made sense too, though, for Swatch, because they have all these brick and mortar Swatch boutiques. This let them prop them up. All of a sudden, they had a reason to get people into the Swatch store. Maybe you go there and they don't have the watch. Maybe you're mad. Maybe you're like, but I stood in line for 2 hours. I guess I'll just buy another Swatch anyway. Regardless, it funneled money to their brick and mortar locations, something that Swatch had been really struggling to do lately. So there was a big, powerful reason to keep doing it like that from a corporate perspective, even though it alienated a lot of consumers that just could not get the watch and would refuse to pay a secondhand. It's like the secondhand Rolex thing. I ain't paying no $1,000 for a MoonSwatch. All right. I'm going to pay retail or less than retail. Those are my rules. So given that, they have this hope now that most people that live near a boutique that wanted one of these have probably already got one. Let's put them online and see if we can really juice up some sales, especially because the MoonSwatches are really, really affordable watches. So they're much, much, much cheaper than most of the watches we do because they're under smartwatch pricing. So they have that separate segment that they appeal to, and they're fun and all of the rest of it. So given all of that, I think that's the angle that they're running with there. But it is another sign of that question of watch market collapse. It isn't a sign of watch market strength that you had to expand where you were selling the watch. So is it good for consumers? Absolutely. I'm thrilled that Swatch has decided to go ahead and put some of these online. I think they should have done all of them immediately, but I think they're still trying to have their cake and eat it too. And they want to, they're trying to min-max this max really, but to maximize what revenue they can out of this and squeeze every last drop out of the hype bubble before it's just a splattered sud all over the floor. And the analogy kind of fell apart about 25% of the way through, but I had to see it through. Underachieving Watch Collector says, Siegel is doing the ETA or ETA mistake. They could be, especially as soft as things are right now. I do not know if it's going to be in their best interest. Siegel, while I believe they assemble some watches, it's their movements that are what are in demand. It could be. They're a little more complicated in some ways because the suspicion has been that they may be doing this because there's so many Chinese brands that want to start using the movements that they're going to still be able to keep up with all the volume that they wanted to sell, just focusing on Chinese markets. And that's, the rumor, we'll put it that way, because I haven't seen any confirmation. The rumor is these 10,000 unit minimums, those are for foreign buyers, that Chinese companies are not going to be bound by that. So it could be a move. And I don't want to speculate too much. In China, the government is heavily involved in what businesses do. There may be some stuff. There may have been pressure for them to do first priority to the Chinese manufacturers, especially because we've seen a lot of Chinese watchmaking companies start up. They sell a lot of watches through AliExpress. We talked about that earlier when we were discussing Nth. So it may be different than when Swatch had at a Swatch Group, and they were like, you know what? Why are we letting our competitors have all of these? Let's just do them internally. And then what ended up happening is all these other companies developed their own in-house movements, and Etta probably sells fewer movements now because of their decisions rather than maximizing the revenue that Swatch Group could have brought in on the movement side. It also empowered Sellita to step in and fill a lot of that vacuum. So basically what Etta did empowered a lot of other people that I think they were short-sighted, and they didn't foresee that. They didn't think it would happen that way. I don't know if it happens that way with Siegel, because that's such old movement technology. Chronograph development's very expensive. So there are some affordable chronographs that you can move into from Siegel, but I don't know if anyone develops a new one and undercuts what Siegel's price was at. Probably not, would be my suspicion. Don't know if it's true, but I'm just here to speculate. That's what I do. So Junior Johnson, welcome to the live stream. And Michigan, I was in Detroit a couple months ago, in fact, for a conference. So I don't know. You didn't say you were in Detroit, but Michigan, Detroit, it's close. So welcome aboard. And let's see. Escapement Show says, I believe Swatch have said they are going to eventually roll out the full 11 MoonSwatches over time. It is inevitable. They will quit moving at any meaningful volume at the boutiques, and there won't be enough demand to keep it hard to get. So you might as well put them online. I thought they would. I honestly thought they would have done it far sooner than now. But we can't always be right on all of that. So Underachieving says, I believe even Tudor is selling the pink dial Black Bay Chrono online. I don't know. I've seen more of them show up on collector wrist shots, on Watch Crunch, but I didn't remember if that thing was limited or not. The new blue one is not limited, but it is boutique only for the time being, at least. I don't know if Tudor typically makes things boutique and then releases them from being boutique only or not. I do not know. I haven't followed it well enough. Skateman adds in, have Siegel said that a conglomerate or holding company cannot buy a bulk load of the ST19 movements and resell them. I have not heard that there was any limit on that happening. So if someone's got the capital to do it, maybe that ends up we'll have to see. We'll have to see. I have suspected that companies are planning around not using the Siegel anymore, but I'm basing that on one instance only. The fact that we saw that collaboration we talked about last week. The collaboration, the watches weren't it was weird. Anyway, the Moser and the Studio Underdog thing. The Studio Underdog, the one big takeaway for collectors was the 03 series reveal, which looked a lot like the 01 series, except it's a mono pusher. It's not using the Siegel movement. It's using an Etta, I believe, movement for the mono. Maybe it's a Sellita. I don't remember. It's using a Swiss movement for the mono pusher tech. So that was probably in development for a while, but I think it would not surprise me if instead of continuing the 01 series, if Studio Underdog ended up going, you know what, let's just move to the mono pushers, maybe use the same dials even, and just make them all 03 series once he runs out of his supply of the Siegel movements. I don't know. I don't know if another one of the chronograph, more affordable chronographs is a straight up drop in replacement for the Siegel is the thing. Those, with the positioning of the subdials and such, I don't know if it is or isn't. I don't know enough about the movements, quite frankly. Underachieving asks, maybe China, she being the president of China, put the screws on Siegel. Yeah, I doubt he personally did, but I have wondered if the government had maybe stepped in and said, you're selling a lot to European manufacturers, American manufacturers, and we've got a lot of upstart Chinese watch manufacturers that could really use those movements. And they're like, absolutely, let's go ahead and do it. Ken says they will kill the MoonSwatch hype entirely by making it available online. At least when it was sold in stores, there was an inkling of flex to it. Similar to Rolex refusing to do it, online sales devalue the brand. At this point, they may feel there's not enough left to exploit on hype. Swatch Group Swatch under Swatch Group, unlike Rolex, there is, I would assume, no pressure long-term for Swatch to have ever expected, like, they don't care what secondhand values are on the MoonSwatch. It can be $1. No, who buys swatches for value retention or revenue? And I know there are models that have appreciated because they were very limited runs and they're collectible now and all of that. The MoonSwatch volume, this is where it kind of never makes a lot of sense long-term for Rolex either in certain ways. I mean, Rolex is a luxury brand, so there will always be that aspect. When you make 1.2 million watches a year, the notion that submariners are always going to appreciate in value is laughable. To me, it is laughable. There are too many of them out there, and they hold up way too well now to expect that those would not eventually fall in pricing. The more limited stuff, another story. But GMTs and subs long-term, I just don't see the, like investment-wise, and I'm not an investor. I'm not giving you I am an investor, but I'm not an investment advisor, and nothing I'm going to say on this channel is to be construed as investment advice. I would not see it as like as a diversification, but this whole like beating the S&P 500 index long-term, I just don't understand how anything that makes that many units of something could ever do it long-term. I struggle with it. Same with MoonSwatch though. Back to our story here. So they made millions of them, millions. It's just it's too common. It's too common to really be hype. Ultimately, if everyone can have it, is it really hype? And yeah, they were throttling it artificially through the stores, but I just think they're not selling enough of them anymore. So yes, I agree with you, Ken. They will kill the MoonSwatch hype. I do think it will entirely die off, but it is what it is. So we'll have to see. Hey, Jason, greetings from Aruba, he says. Welcome to the live stream. Good to see you here. Matthew, thank you for being on the live stream as well and for being a 99-cent club member. Do you think Moser used their position to help get Studio Underdog access to a reasonable Swiss movement? No, I do not. I think Studio Underdog was able to get that entirely on their own. Let's see. Thelonious Monk, welcome to the live stream. Studio Underdog sells a lot of watches. They do. And I've wondered, but do they sell enough that they are comfortable buying a 10,000 unit bulk order of Siegel movements? Because it's not just a question of necessarily that they'd be able to eventually sell them. How quickly could they build the watches to sell them? I get that there are like backlogs for 01 series. So I've wondered, I mean, maybe, but it's still a huge capital outlay up front. I'm going to use another pinball example. I hate doing that, but I know more about pinball, honestly, than I do watches. There's a company out of Wisconsin called Spooky Pinball. They're a boutique manufacturer. They don't make a lot of units. They've grown over time, though. But early in their existence, they were pretty transparent about it. They would order parts in supply units of 50. They would build 50 machines and order those supplies. If they were able to order, they had a run of a game that they made 550 of. Had they been able to buy 500 of the parts at a time, would it have been cheaper for them? Absolutely. It would have been a better deal, better economy of scale. However, the capital needed to do that. 500 pinball machines, all paid for up front before they brought in the money. They couldn't swing it. So they did them in 50s where they could manage it and manage the risk. So I don't know. That's the part. Ken says demand is greater than 1.2 million units. That's in the reference to my statement on Rolex. Yes, it is. However, it's 1.2 million units every single year. And I think eventually the volume over eclipses the amount. There's not enough people being born that can afford the watches that will, when you have like 8 years of the same model run, or like in the case of the Explorer 16, 570, they ran that for like 12 years. It's just, there's a lot there. And the question is, does that demand stay forever? Maybe. I don't know. I don't see anything really disrupting the demand for Rolex. But even they, I have heard, are suffering through the lower demand from China, because that's not a question of Rolex becoming less popular. It's simply a question of they cannot afford it now. There are people that would want something, but they can't afford it. They might as well not be customers. Their demand is irrelevant. So it's an interesting time that we're going through right now. They're very well positioned. But long term, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of their models end up being below retail. Because as people, I don't want to turn this into a total Rolex discussion, but that's been an interesting challenge for them. Part of the reason why people get so angry about the Rolex thing is they never reached the point, Rolex hasn't, with like Audemars Piguet or the sports watches from Longa or whatever, where the notion that it's so luxury that you can't immediately go in and buy it, the vast bulk of people who demand Rolex, that watch ain't that good. So that's the problem that Rolex has run into. They have alienated a big chunk of the customer base that's like, when did you start thinking you were Patek? You're not Patek. And a lot of them are people that have just saved up for a retirement watch. They have no notion of the idea of, they don't go around buying Ferraris and stuff. They have no notion that if you have the money for something that you would be told no. People gravitate to other things when they learn more. Some don't. Some have been like, no, I want the Rolex, and they're gonna wait until they can get that Rolex, or they'll pay the extra and they'll buy it on the secondhand market. But a lot of other people, I think Rolex has been really worried that they've bled customers off to other places. And the reason why I say that with the confidence I do is everything else that Rolex has done says that they worry about this. Going from 1 million to 1.2 million units on watches, onboarding 3 new factories over the next 4 years, using temporary production facility expansion options right now, doing free training to expand their service center staff, which has only one purpose: to service more watches. Everything that they are doing says that they want to increase volume. If they were comfortable with being an elitist, like you need to be on a wait list to get stuff, that would not be the actions that I feel they would take. That's my interpretation. So, all right, let's see. Jason says, Andrew Morgan proxies the Moser and Studio Underdog collaboration. I don't know what you mean by proxy, so I'm not quite sure on that. Thelonious says, there's a Watch Gecko article where Studio Underdog talks about moving 5,000 units in 9 hours. I doubt they'd be affected by the change. In that case, if that is true, then he will be able to, or they, I should say, will be able to easily weather the Seagull change. It will pack the smaller ones then. But interesting. Junior says, I've always wanted a pinball machine. They new in box started about $7,000. So I'm just going to say that so you get some context. If you want to go used, you can go way, way less. But if you want anything that uses solid state computer electronics, you'll probably have to pay over $1,000 minimum if it's working. If it's unworking and you want to work on them, you can get a deal. Let's see. Joe says, update on the Rolex sub, no date for you. Not really. I went in and talked to the AD, I don't know, like 5 weeks ago or something. And it was the person I'd been talking with. They said they thought it would be pretty achievable. They just don't have them right now. I also asked about a particular date, and they said that one is not going to be achievable. That I wanted to try one of them on. So I was just curious, but they let me try. They didn't have anything. They had 3 watches, they said, in stock. They were all iced out Rolexes. But they're also renovating right now. So even their samples were gone because they're renovating the entire Rolex section. So they had shipped off all of their samples without the movements in them down to their Missouri store for the time being, I think is what they indicated. So, and I haven't really followed up since then because I got the Parmigiani anyway, though it's in for a dial service. So it's just been, it is what it is. So no real update of interest or note. Underachieving says Rolex definitely burned some bridges. I don't think they've done themselves any favors. Winning over investors is great if that's your strategy, but it's not Rolex's strategy. In fact, my AD, and I've read this in some articles too, but they've been, I have 2 ADs in the area. One of them was pretty blunt when I told them, well, the other AD said, if I buy a couple of Omegas, they could make the sub happen. She's like, Rolex really doesn't like us to do that. We're told we're supposed to sell in our service area and we're not supposed to try and convince people to buy other stuff to get the watch. So Jason has a question for everyone, not just for me. Would you be willing to support a new 2K integrated bracelet watch, automatic 904L, non-stock components, 800 HV resistant, and not what would it take for you to support it? That is tough. All right, my take. Would I be willing? Probably not. Two reasons. One, because I'm seeing new, I'm assuming new integrated bracelet watches with a new brand. I probably wouldn't be able to try it on. And so I would worry about, well, what's the return policy? Am I going to have to just sell it if I don't like it? If it's a new brand, I ain't going to probably be able to sell it for more. I'm going to take a pretty big hit on a gamble. I don't care if it's 904L versus 316L. And I've been very hit or miss with integrated bracelet watches. Like I didn't love the Tissot. It was okay. It was comfortable, but I didn't love it. So yeah, it's tough. I don't know. Of course, I have to see the design. The design is the most important thing. But if it's a no name, like it's something new, like a micro brand, if it's over 1,000, I get much more leery. So Jason follows up separately, clarifying that he meant Andrew Morgan facilitated the Moser Studio Underdog collaboration. Oh, okay. Okay. I had no idea that he had done that. I just knew he had the thing with the what was the watch, the red watch, the Bel Canto. So with Christopher Ward. Christopher Ward is not a micro brand, folks. Say that. Some people keep saying it is not. It didn't start like a micro brand, and size at this point is definitely not a micro brand. The Elonia says, I wonder how the resurgence of discounts with the larger brands will affect the micro brand market. Most of the discounting that I've seen has been on the higher dollar stuff. So I think they're kind of two separate, like the Venn diagram part, I don't think is too big there. Sorry, my little teeny hands don't make it so. I can't do it. So I don't think that's going to be too big of an issue. Now, more so though, if like we start seeing a lot of discounts on like Orients, Casios, Seikos, Citizens, that could create a lot of pressure because those are well-known established brands that people will inherently trust more. But it's an interesting question. But I've heard a lot of the discounting at the luxury dealers is back in play, which again is another sign of this sort of watch market collapse clickbaity title, which I want to go ahead and show you the last piece on that. So this is from Swiss Info website, and link is in the video description. We'll go ahead and read the article. But this is the third and final thing that I think is yet from another disparate perspective. So we talked about Nth and their challenges as a micro brand doing homages and being pressured out of business. We've talked about the MoonSwatch, which is a mass-produced but very low-cost watch now being available online to broaden its capabilities to reach sales. The third sign of watch market collapses can be jobs. Jobs is probably the cleanest one. That's why I saved it for last. This is the clearest one that there is a problem going on right now. Much like what we've seen with luxury watch manufacturers for about the last year. China is broadly blamed for this, the lack of demand in China, the lack of sales in China. However, Gerard Perregaux and Ulysse Nardon, they used to be in the Kering group. They broke away as independents, but they're both actually under the same group after their breakaway, the Sowind group. They have put on furlough, what we in the US would call furlough. I believe their technical term in Switzerland is called short-time work, 15% of their workforce. So the way that kind of functions, and the article will go into more details, is there's a retention policy governmental support program that Switzerland has where you can temporarily activate this short-time work furloughing process. The employees make most of their money. The jobs technically still exist, so you don't have to actually cut them, but the government underwrites this level of support so that the individuals can go back to work once the lull passes. So this is presuming that will be a lull. I think it's a presumption. I think GP and UN and everyone else has absolutely zero idea about this. I remember seeing the mid-year financials for Swatch Group and the statement. I remember it was from the CFO or CEO or who it was, because of course they're an investor group, public investment, so we get to see their financial reports. They claimed that they were like, I don't remember, they said confident. I'm going to say they said confident. I don't remember exactly. They said they were confident that people were going to go ahead and swoop in, and China was going to be better in 2025. Where in the world does anyone think China's sales are going to be better in 2025? They could be, but I'm sounding incredulous because I'm like, it feels made up to me. What about what China has done at all suggests that? When they came out of the third plenum or whatever it was called, their big 5-year they call it the third and is every 5 years, but their big financial, big, Communist Party powwow where they come up with their major strategies. It was basically just keep doing what they were doing, invest in the areas they were already investing. No, I didn't see any glorious change in strategy from the Chinese government. So maybe the markets recover because inflation gets tamped down enough, but it doesn't matter, I guess. My point is, it seems very, very speculative. I think they're just hoping that in 2025, Chinese watch sales skyrocket back up to some level of normalcy, pre-pandemic normalcy is what I'm assuming they are hoping for. This article is not just about GDP and UN, though. Those are the two confirmed watch manufacturers that indicated that they were doing these approximately 15% reduction. However, it's noted further in the article that a number of the companies that supply watch parts in Switzerland have invoked this, are using this furloughing process. In fact, in the Jura, apologies for my terrible pronunciation, but the canton of Jura, which is one of the major cantons in Switzerland for component manufacture, approximately 40 companies have submitted application for the short-term work compensation program. So this is a lot more significant than just UN and GP and nobody caring about their watches because the UNs are too big and the GPs look like APs. That is not what this is. This is much broader than that. And this is a very large sign of a sales issue going on widespread, impacting the watch market. So in terms of watch market collapse, that I think is the biggest red flag that we've got is this. The Swiss manufacturers on the high end are doing the furloughing to hopefully weather this. I am sure it is more than GP and UN. They are just the ones that they were first to actually confirm that they're doing it. But I think we will see it. They are not the only non-Rolex brands in Switzerland that people might turn to as a second or third look, right? It would not shock me if we see GLC end up in this list. It would not shock me if we end up seeing some other, maybe other, what I might call second breath brands. I think that Cartier will be fine. They might be able to resist this. Rolex will be fine. They'll be able to resist this. Patek is probably going to be okay. Vacheron, maybe. I mean, I know they're Holy Trinity, but I don't know. Other than Blue Dial overseas, what's really in high demand out of them anymore? I'm not sure anything is. Breitling might suffer some. Panerai, I bet you Panerai will end up showing up. We can go through the whole list, but so it's GP and UN right now. Yet no, they're not first breath manufacturers, but they're well known, especially GP, and it's not a good sign, especially if the component manufacturers are doing this sort of thing. So anyway, so that's the third and final piece of my triangle argument of potential watch market collapse. So micro brand homage is going out of business. Sorry, Nth. Swatch Group saying swatches, we're going to start selling moon watches online and on China and the US, try and goose sales. That's not a positive development from them as a brand. It's great for us as consumers, unless you were hoarding them because you wanted them to go up in value and then maybe sell now. And then obviously the use of furloughing for a number of the luxury tier stuff. So this is impacting all price levels and it's widespread. It's not just Swiss stuff. So anyway, those are my arguments for that. And now getting all the way back to underachieving watch collector at the start, asking about discounting, fire sale. Obviously, Nth is doing a fire sale. I didn't call it fire sale, but they're going out of business sale, as is Hodinkee, getting out of that. We know how that worked with the Crown and Caliber acquisition. That's not new news, so to speak. But I've heard a lot of luxury brands discounting is back. We're not touching on it here because I have other things I'll have to do, but we might talk about it next week. But Breitling's new announcement of all those NFL watches that they're doing, maybe those are limited enough that they won't have to discount them. But so not all teams are created equal. We'll have to see, and they're very high priced. I have heard that discounting is back for a number of the not Rolex, but again, if you want to walk in, that you should be able to ask for a discount on an Omega at this point. You should be able to ask for a discount on a Breitling. That isn't limited at this point. You should be able to ask for a discount on a JLC at this point. I'm more curious. This will be a very big sign of watch market collapse issues, would be if any of the major conglomerates lower their price point. Richemont did this in the early 2000s. It was devastating for them to do because the blowback was incredibly bad. Ken talked earlier about the impact on the hype of the MoonSwatch with it going online and how Swatch is killing that hype off. Imagine what happened with Richemont when they immediately devalued every watch from its retail price in one fell swoop. Now, they didn't do it by a lot. I think it was like 3 to 5%. It's still like everyone went to the store and bought those and was now immediately told. We've seen this recently with Tesla. When Tesla has dramatically cut the prices on their cars, how does it feel to be the person who paid too much for something that is exactly the same? And all of a sudden it just became cheaper. We've been seeing the inverse of that lately, where the companies have been desperately trying to drive the prices up. Richemont is a good case in point, and everyone's sitting here shrugging, going, why is a Reverso 35 to 45% higher now than it was 5 years ago? It's got the same movement and everything, and it does not make sense from a consumer perspective. That is not inflation. It's more than inflation. It's gouging. This is my take. It's gouging. So will there be enough pressure that the discount, they will prefer the discounting. The discounting doesn't look bad for them. Will it get so bad that some of these brands will actually have to physically lower the MSRP on the price tag? I am not at that point to say that I think that will happen. I'm going to still say I do not think we are at that state yet. If we go another year with low China demand, maybe it happens. Maybe it happens just in China. It doesn't have to be international. They can do it in just specific places. But I think it's very, very interesting. So that's what I think. That I do think there are signs of it. We can collapse as a clickbait word, but the watch market is soft. It's showing softer signs. Is it a good time to buy? I have no idea. I think that it looks like a good time for a lot of secondhand prices. The non-hype pieces, a lot of stuff has been secondhand flattened out pretty well because it's already discounted quite a bit. Some of that stuff will probably fall more, sure. The stuff that's more popular, a little bit. It's a question of, of dollars. And I mean, like, instead of like hundreds or thousands of dollars, it's more like tens or hundreds of dollars. Like, 2 months ago, I put in a request for a quote from a secondhand dealer for my Omega Seamaster 300M. And I didn't sell it to him. And I put in another request this week, and it had fallen. Their offer had fallen by like $50. So not much of a change, but it is what it is. Let me go ahead and try and get caught up with the chat because you guys have been very, very talkative while I was going. Sorry, I rambled on for more than I normally would. I try and interact more sporadically during the episode. Escapement says, as Dennis said, I'd have to see the design. That's regarding Jason's question about a 2K integrated bracelet. Ken agrees on the PRX. I just wish I loved the bracelet a little bit more. Junior says, I'm burnt out on integrated bracelet watches. They're definitely on the decline in terms of seeing new ones come out. I think this year, the only major new one that came out was the new Gerald Charles one, at least at the high end. But, having tried the Parmigiani Tonda PF one, granted, that is exponentially more money than a PRX, but that bracelet, trying something that comfortable, I was like, wow, I see why some people really love these so much. And Jason, thanks everyone for providing the feedback. Brian, welcome to the live stream, Brian. Hi, all JJ and Curly and Mookie and Mr. GMT sent me here. Well, some of those names sound familiar. Some of them don't. Some of them sound like maybe you made them up, but regardless, I appreciate it. And so I thank you for being here, and I thank them for providing the reference. It's very kind of them. Ken says, Gerard Perregaux are dirt cheap now used. I might take my chances on one and hope TPG gets out of jail. Oh, you got me to laugh. TPG is Timepiece Gentleman. Sorry, I said what GP was. I just hate what TPG. That is good. That is good. I still, for those that don't know, really long time, because I haven't mentioned it in a while, long time channel watchers know, I will not consider GP. And the reason I don't is entirely stupid. It is solely because I remember reading on Reddit how Timepiece Gentleman was like, had one, and just hyped it and hyped it and hyped it. And it poisoned the whole brand. That one individual, not at all associated in any official capacity with the brand, poisoned me on the entire brand. I will probably get over it someday, but I still have not at this point. So, but whenever I talk about GP, I have plenty of GP fans who come in and they don't like it when I say that. So it's just, we all have our biases in the hobby. It's just, it is what it is. I want to say I've disliked a brand for lesser reasons, but that's a pretty lame reason in and of itself. But it's just, I can't help but think of Timepiece Gentleman when I see GP. Thank you for the upvote, by the way, Junior. I do appreciate it. Mark and Lynn Shapiro, welcome to the live stream. I believe that Studio Underdog uses the Lajou Perret. Oh, is that for the mono pusher? I'm going to guess that for their new one. I can't remember. I read it on one of the stat sites on the summary of them in the Moser watches, but I just do not recall. Let's see. Joe adds, Caring, that's the Caring Group, sold Gerard Perregaux and Ulysse Nardon to management, so it is company employee owned now. Yes. And I've been much more interested in them since that's happened because I think it gives them a lot more freedom. However, as noted, with my GP biases, I've mostly only focused on looking at the actual watches from Ulysse Nardon. By and large, though, it's a brand that is too large for me. They've got that very large watch Russian aesthetic that I kind of associate with them and Victa and a couple other brands, I suppose. Brian says, my brother TB at the Escapement Show, and I see you are saying hi to other people in the chat. Sometimes I click before I read. I should probably read first. Escapement says, I like Gerard Perregaux and Ulysse Nardon. Gerard Perregaux have a very rich heritage. It's sad to see them in this position. It is only about 15% of the workforce. So, it's not totally dire, but it's not a good sign. It's not a good sign for the health of the manufacturers, or more particularly it's the people who work for them. So it's always rough watching people have their livelihood impacted because of market cycles. Escapement says, Dennis in chat, do you see many more watch companies that aren't already selling online going to online sales because of the state of the market? My short answer would be no, not over the state of the market. The bigger question for like a brand like Rolex and stuff will be, will the legal system make some of them that have refused to do so go to selling online? I think that's going to be the bigger thing in play. Otherwise, I think most of them are probably going to be either they're just not in stores and that's not going to be a strategy like what Swatch is doing. Swatch already was selling online. The MoonSwatch was supposed to be sold online from the get-go, other than first couple weeks of introduction. So that was just for them, it was a very logical workflow thing to ultimately do. It's just not going to be how most of the other ones think. I think a lot of them worry it will cheapen their brand if it's available online. Not to mention you have to have the impacts of that on a distribution network. And what does that mean? Again, in pinball, they have distributors. Some of them are selling directly now. Distributors don't like that because they sell at the same price. So it's tough. Jason says, me and my new business partner agreed to never discount our watches. We'd rather give something more or something special to our loyal customers. Aussie Expat Watches says, good morning. And he says, F integrated bracelet watches. Dead to me. Hashtag dead to me. Yes, very dead to you. Ken says, I think if a buyer is going online, they'd all be willing to get it from a gray dealer cheaper. Hence, I don't see online sales helping the primary market much. So that's a good point. See, most of these watches you can get online, just go gray or more likely go secondhand and buy a used one. Let's see. Junior saying hello to people. Aussie thinks the entry-level GP is terrible. I don't know what entry-level GP is. Most people talk about the Laureato. That's really the only one I'm truly familiar with from them. Ken says, from a guy who has 5 tutors. Okay. All right. So y'all need to simmer down before it gets all super, super salty. I sometimes think about getting another tutor. I don't have any currently. Aussie says, it's 100% reasonable to unwant a watch because of someone you don't like is associated. My enthusiasm for getting an AP reduced significantly after their Travis Scott collaboration. And we've talked earlier, that's how some people are, they're bitter about, they blame Rolex for what the ADs do to them. Even though the ADs are almost always independently owned. Rolex gets blamed for the games ADs make people play. And some people won't wear a Rolex because they don't want to be associated with that type, like that experience, or the type of people they associate with wearing Rolex, because there's a lot of non-collectors who wear them. So let's see. Aussie says, brands can't have it both ways. Choose a bad ambassador hurts just like a good ambassador helps. I don't know if good ambassadors help all that much, actually. I can see where choosing a bad ambassador would definitely hurt. So I don't know them. Escapement says, I think Studio Underdog uses the Lejeune Perret on their Model 2 field watch. Oh, okay. I could not remember at all what they use in the field watch. The Seagull ST9 in their chronograph watches. Not the new 03 series, though. I know it's not a Seagull in the mono pusher. I just can't remember if it's a Solita or an Etta. I read it in a list. I'm sure it's not a Seagull in the new 03. Ken says, I'm glad we are happy that watches are down and available for collectors, but the fact remains that all the alternatives and collectibles are down the same. No, that's the thing. None of this is unique, but that gets way beyond the scope of this channel. None of this is, the best I could do is give you those pinball examples, because I don't do YouTube for pinball, but I have 2 podcasts where I do pinball. So it's my other hobby that I like do content in. And so I can tell you it is the same for pinballs. Pinball just had the Uncanny X-Men announcement from Stern Pinball. And there's a ton of excitement about it, in part because it's unique looking, but in part, they've been desperate for something to get excited about. It has been rough. And pinball doesn't turn out games the same way. Like, we have new watches every week. Pinball, like a strong year is a dozen pinball machines. So it's just a different market, but true. And I have friends that collect comic books. Same thing. It's down. Cars. I don't have any friends that collect cars, but you might know some friends who collect cars, and I bet you they'll tell you that is down as well. Ken adds, until I see other collectibles go up and watches still down, the issue is still mostly macroeconomic in nature, and all we are trying to do is gather news bits for confirmation bias. Yes, but it gives us something fun to talk about. Speaking of fun, unfortunately, I have to end this fun now because I have some errands that I need to run and an appointment that I have to get to. So I'm going to call it for today. Thank you, everyone, for participating in the very robust discussion. I really appreciate it. Everyone who tuned in live and engaged in the chat in particular, very, very, very helpful. The live stream does not work. It's me solo almost always, at least on these Saturdays. It's me solo. I am not that interesting to listen to. So being able to engage with the chat is how it works. So I very much appreciate you all being there. My voice is giving out now because I've talked for so much today. So thank you. I really do appreciate it. If you're watching the recording, share your thoughts on the macroeconomic state of this and how much you think that's just a case of macroeconomics impacting watches, and how much of it is maybe specific to the watch industry and when you might think it would recover. I'd love to read that. I'll plan to be back next Saturday. Might have a pre-recorded in between. I did have a 99 Cent Club member, as I mentioned at the start of the live stream, submit some watches for roasting. That's where I'm deliberately mean to watches. So I'm hoping to get that out within the next week. No promises. Depends on how my work schedule is, because this is not my day job. I have a real job, and that is what I focus on. So anyway, I will be back, though. Plan to be back, at least, unless I'm sick or something, for the next stream. I will talk to you all then. Take care, everybody, and have a really good weekend.